Mr. Nungesser.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. If you'd allow me, I'm going to skip and just pull a bunch of things out of my speech to get it all out. I did provide you all with a booklet with everything in there. First of all, there's a group, MSRC, Emergency Response Corporation, that was set up after the Exxon spill. In Lake Charles, they had miles. They used to brag they had enough boom to go to California and back. They were set up. I was there when they responded to an oil spill in the Sabine River. Got 95% of the oil before it hit open water. They were ineffective, not prepared, had no boom, no equipment for this response. The stuff they brought to my parish sat on trailers for months. Why? Did Congress let them off the hook? Did the oil companies drop the ball? I don't know. But we must look into why that corporation, that was so effective at having oil spill drills monthly, yearly, quarterly, that I was involved in. I was in the oil field before I ran for public office. But we must look into why that failure, why they were allowed not to keep up their assets, their training, the things that were in place before this tragedy. On my first flight with Captain Stanton to view the area after the oil spill, I was very disturbed to learn that there was no plan to keep it out the marsh. Captain Stanton, and I quote, said, "Don't worry, President Nungesser, we're going to be here to help you clean up your marsh." I asked him to land the chopper. I said, "We're not going to clean it up out the marsh. We must keep it out the marsh." There was no plan then, and there is no plan now. Had it not been for President Obama's visit to Plaquemines Parish, we would not have got approval for the jackup boats that were on the front line and to this day are still picking up more oil than anybody else. Last week they picked up 8,000 gallons of oil. I'm not sure everyone wants to know what's going on right now. They don't want us bringing the oil in. They don't want us identifying it. I'm passionate here today because sitting before you today, and I know we've come to the table and sat at the table, I've stayed off TV, but sitting here today, I still can't tell you who's in charge. When we talk about putting Coast Guard people, and I applaud the men and women of the Coast Guard, but this was a disaster from the way it was handled from day one. We had Coast Guard people sitting in my office that couldn't make a decision, has never made a decision, and to this day, Plaquemines Parish, which has more coastline, more oil in the marsh than any other parish or any other area, has yet to receive its first foot of ocean boom. We laid out a plan with pilings and ocean boom to keep it out the marsh, to keep it out of the oyster beds, out of the shrimp breeding grounds. The first foot has never been deployed. So although I've stayed off TV, I am still angry that we're talking about the successful things that have happened. The berms were decided not to be done by a group of Washington staffers. I took a boat to Grand Isle, I wasn't invited, and got in to see the president. And he sent a group back down to have a roundtable discussion the way it should have been from day one. We should have had a seat at the table. Then the berms were approved, and they are picking up oil. Just this week, we got oil off and it is a lot easier to clean it off of beaches than as you've seen in the marsh. But here, this late in the game, I still can't tell you who's in charge. The men and women of the Coast Guard do a great job. They're the firemen. They go out and put out the fire and rescue you. Here we're asking them to gut the house and rebuild it. That system doesn't work. Just like the Corps of Engineers in the levee. They come down and tell us what they're going to do with our levees, yet we keep having problems. We've got to change the system in America to where we spend our money the best way it can be spent. Out of the 5,000 men and women that responded with the Coast Guard, not one of them has oil on their shirt. Did we really do anything there to help prevent the wildlife from dying, the marshes from being destroyed? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anything where they benefited the response to this disaster. So we got to relook at the whole system if we're ever going to respond in a fair way, in a way that will clean up the marsh and keep the thousands of animals from dying and affecting our way of life. Look, Plaquemines Parish is the #1 producer of oil and gas for Louisiana. We're also #1 in crab, shrimp, and oysters. We want our oil field, and there's a way to work together. But the passion is because early on, had the president not come down and demanded the Coast Guard put a jack-up boats that are still out there picking up oil. This disaster would have had far greater impact. And I'll tell you today, the men and women out on those jack-up boats, local fishermen, go out at night and pick up oil. In my opinion, have done more to prevent oil and continue to pick up oil than all the subcontractors that are in my parish with skimmers on trailers and booms sitting on trailers. So we need to retool this whole thing. Thank you very much.